Hello, and welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Lowell. Every once in a while, we do these interviews with people who are producing interesting products or doing interesting work in the RPG field. And this time, we're very lucky to be joined by Whitney Delaglio, and she is the creator of Prism, which is currently on Kickstarter. Whitney, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, what would you say if you have to do the elevator pitch, the quick, 1-minute pitch for Prism? What would you say that is?
The elevator pitch is Prism is an aquatic role-playing game about conflict resolution and relationships.
So in this game, what are you playing? Who are you playing in the setting?
You are playing a character who lives in the world of Prism. The character you play will have a loyalty, a template, which kind of gives you some flavor to your character, a family, which is kind of like in D&D terms your race, and a vocation, which in D&D terms is your profession or class, rather.
And this is a diceless game, right?
Yes, this is a diceless game.
So I'm going to drill down on a couple of things here. What made you decide to go diceless with something like this?
Well, it was actually originally a D10 system. And as I was working at the game, I was like, there are games that I do like where you roll dice, because like the ones with like difficulty thresholds, like Powered by the Apocalypse, or pool dice, where it's like, I'm going to use this skill, and this skill, and this skill, like in Lady Blackford. But after playing D&D, there's moments where you're like, I'm going to put all my points in diplomacy, and I'm going to be the most diplomatic person in the world. And then you roll a 1, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess not. So I'm like, I want to avoid that because I want a player to be able to salvage any situation if they really, really want to. So being diceless, it means that your character has expertise in a handful of skills. So when they are set to a task, they either have enough expertise or they don't. And if they do it with flying colors, like, no problem. And if they don't have enough expertise, they can negotiate with the game master to succeed anyway, just succeed at the cost.
So the game master is the one kind of setting up, negotiating what the difficulty is?
Yeah. So
how long have you been working on this?
I've been working on this for 6 years and change now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did it start pretty much the concept where you have it now, or where did it originate from for you?
It's definitely a lot different back when I first started. Because when I first started, it was more like a JRPG, and there was like a Pokemon fire versus water kind of mechanic for spell casting, and it was a lot more crunchy, and it was a lot more combat oriented. And I think for a while it was just at that phase where, you put stuff in a game that you think the game needs, but doesn't actually need and isn't actually what you want. And I was like, I want to be more social. Why do I have all these things that make it more people punching each other in the face?
So like kind of cutting away until you've got your sense of this is what I want the game to be focused on.
Yeah.
By the way, I do want to point out also, if anyone hasn't read it, Bree Sheldon has a great 5 questions interview blog post up with you that also has some great deals. I just want to give a shout out to that because I thought that was a very nice piece that just was posted today. In the beginning, you have a content warning, and you say positive sexuality, partial nudity, intimacy, and emotional vulnerability. So where is that coming from in the game and the setting?
Well, the partial nudity is mostly the artwork, of course, because there's a lot of pinups and people and tasteful nudes, and the emotional vulnerability is more, since it's a game about relationships. That means you and the person you're in a relationship with, whether that be an NPC or a PC, can get pretty heavy. Like that was at a play test where 2 players were in a very unhealthy relationship and they were screaming at each other almost the entire time.
Ooh.
And then I was playing a one-on-one with a friend of mine, and we were both crying at the end as players. It was really cute.
Oh wow!
But just to prepare people for that, because you don't want to dive into a game like that and be like, why didn't anyone warn me? Because I've been in games where no one warned me. I'm like, I don't feel good about this.
The art is great. I love the style. Did you kind of develop into the style? It's just very much how you draw, because it's really striking throughout.
This is pretty much how I've drawn for a while now. Yeah, it's just gotten a lot better.
It's clean and it's consistent and it is so striking and it really adds to the feel of the game. I really love it. I notice on the cover art, the two figures kind of connected together, and then you've got the sort of the rainbow of the prism connecting them. Can you talk about what your idea was for that sort of setup for that cover image?
Well, it was basically like trying to incorporate the intro with the overall theme of the game, which is polytheism, because each realm represents one skill in the game, and each realm is linked to one deity, which is associated to a color, and it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. And the two figures are sort of the once upon a time element of the game, because the darker colored figure is the one who unleashed a contagion that basically makes everyone into an angsty, angry, super sad person, and there's nothing they can do about it, and eventually it consumes them. And the white figure is the darker figure's significant other, so it's kind of like a clash between hoping for everything to be okay and the person that's like, no, it's not okay, everything sucks, I'm going to make everyone else be as miserable as I am.
Huh. So what is the character creation process like for this? You've got this tea party set up for that. Can you talk about what that looks like?
For convenience sake, let's just say it's a one-on-one game, so it's the player and the game master. So first they discuss like what kind of game they want to play. If the player has anything they certainly want to do, like, oh, I want to have a wife, or I want to go on an adventure where I find a cure for the contagion, or I'm going to stand up to the hierarchy, or something like that. And then there's a pretty informal step-by-step process where first you decide which realm you belong to. So, like, they might want to be from the red realm, which is like the work hard but party harder realm. They might want to be from the green realm, which is like the we're better than everybody else and we're fancy realm. And then after that, they would pick out their template, which is just like some flavor text. So like they can be like a guardian who was like an older character, but they're like, so they know a little more than everybody else. Or they can be a nocturnal, which is kind of like just someone that likes to hang out when it's nighttime and keep to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And after that step, they pick a family. And there are 3 families that are more like land-based and 3 families that are more sea-based. So they're like, for instance, there's like a weed folk, which is like a robust plant-like humanoid. And as a sea folk example, there's like a toothed fish, which is basically like a mer person that's a kind of a shark or eel. And after that step, they pick a profession, and it's like a diplomat or a medic. And all of those steps gives your character some sort of bonus. So like your realm loyalty means you're better at that skill than you are at the other skills, because that's the skill that pertains to your realm. Your template just gives you like a bit of flavor text, like a guardian, you get wings. Your family gives you a skill, like for instance, the toothfish can turn into a mer person or a person with legs whenever they feel like it. And for family, an example would be a brawler. If they get physically hurt, that will heal emotional pain.
You really leave the world very open. We've got this sense of it being aquatic, of having the land versus the sea. But do you imagine that a lot of sort of actually the Tales is what's going to come out sort of in that original collaborative process or during the play? How do you see that arising?
Yeah, most of that is discussed during the tea party. Because as they develop their characters, they start thinking of ideas of how they came to be or what the world's like around them. Because the last step is picking out a relationship, at least one relationship. And you can just decide like, oh, we're 2 adventurers and we're on a mission to so-and-so. And this is why the world has changed because of what we do. Or here's what we're trying to change. Or there's like a time where someone actually ran the game for me. And they decided that, like, the contagion was, like, super widespread, like Resident Evil style. Like, almost everyone was infected. So, stuff like that. Because I didn't want to have it be too boxed in, because I love coming up with that kind of stuff when I character gen.
So what's some of your favorite stuff you've seen when you've run this in playtests that people have come up with that they've brought as their vision to this world?
Well, I like how they treat the relationship mechanics, because I mean, I always usually want to be like in a happy, loving relationship when I'm playing a game, but it's interesting to see people who are like, I decided that I'm not going to like this person that I'm going on an adventure with, or I'm going to decide that I am in a codependent relationship. So it's just interesting to see all these different kinds of relationships. And it's also interesting to see how people treat their loyalty to the realm they belong to.
Now, the relationships you've got, you have this rating like from +2 to -2, right? Kind of the positive and negative on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what effect that has both in the fiction and to the actual sort of resolution of things?
Sure. So there's like a spectrum of all the way to positive and all the way to negative, and middle being neutral. Neutral doesn't mean like you're indifferent. It just means like basically they're kind of like your coworker. Like, I'll go out with you to happy hour, but I'm not necessarily going to invite you to my home for game night, kind of thing. And negative obviously means that you're not necessarily just happy with them. You're just unhappy with the relationship. And of course, positive is the opposite. So you're pleased with the way the relationship is going for you. So two people can feel completely different about each other. So, I mean, like, I could be madly in love with you and you can be like, oh my gosh, I hate Whitney. I wish you would just leave me alone. So depending on how you feel, you get a bonus that usually comes with a but at the end. So if we're going off the example of me being madly in love with you and you wanting nothing to do with me, I get a bonus when I'm trying to like show off to you, but I am emotionally compromised. So emotional pain is double for me.
Oof. Oh, I love that set of mechanics in there. That is very cool. Are there some other bits of the mechanics that you're like, this is like my favorite part, or these are the things I really dig about what I've created and what I've seen play out at the table?
I'm really liking the diceless mechanic because it's led to a lot of really fun negotiations. Like, I was running a game where a character was jealous of another character, and he's like, I want to ruin his reputation and make him feel bad. I'm like, well, you don't have enough experience to do that, so I'll let you do it at a risk. So you can make him look bad, but you're going to find out that he has ties to a very wealthy family, and this is all going to come back to haunt you. And he's like, I'm okay with that. And then it all spirals out of control, and it was awesome.
Oh, that's great. There's one thing I want to ask you about in particular. This is a weird thing that I noticed, but it stuck with me, is when I was reading through the realms and the different colors, you mentioned that the gold realm is about protecting young people from people who take advantage of them. Where does that come from? What's going on in the setting where that is a thing?
Well, it actually kind of comes from the comic book that came before it, which isn't necessarily like a complete mold of the game. That was more like me fleshing out what I wanted to do. And also it's comes from personal experience, because I know a lot of times as a child and growing up now, there are times that the way I was treated as a kid has changed me to be the way I am now. So I was like, wouldn't it be great if there was a place where if you were like unhappy, there'd be like some grown-ups who'd be like, don't worry, we're going to take care of you and make sure you're heard and validated and safe and happy. And so the Gold Realm was born, essentially.
Oh, no, that's great. It's one of the details when I was reading through it that really struck me, because it wasn't something I had seen as a value for a house or a community or a group inside an RPG before, and I really liked that, so I wanted to point that out. The magic system, or how magic happens or how it occurs, can you describe how that gets played out at the table?
Sure. So the skill that's used to cast spells in this game is aptitude, which is essentially what a friend of mine called the Disney princess skill. So it's like singing, dancing, and rousing crowds with your charisma. So you might cast a spell by doing ballet, you might cast a spell by playing a wind instrument, and it's more loose. It's elemental, but it's pretty loose-ended, so it's more like a elemental tier system. So it's like if you're doing water magic and it's like a simple thing of like, I'm going to fill this cup with water because I'm thirsty. But if you want to like cause like a tsunami to cause a ship to sink, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So of course you need to have more points in aptitude to do that.
And we've got the fire and the earth and water. Am I right on those elements, or am I?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a pretty tight system within that. How do players react to that? Hail and Inferno and Seism, is that something that they dig and make use of a lot, or is magic feel more secondary to the social stuff here?
I feel like most of the time the magic is used more as a kind of like a glamour kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or they use it for problem solving. Like, I'm going to make this little water thing to like listen in on someone else's conversation. So it's more like a creative problem solving tool more than anything else. Or it can be used to murder people. Like I've had a player set fire to an NPC that they were interrogating, and it was awesome.
So, also in the system, you have this idea of blessings and curses, and what are those?
So, blessing and curses is basically when you pledge your loyalty to a realm, each realm has like a code of ethics. So, like for instance, the Green Realm, which is the Fancy Pants realm, it's like, you know, family first, everyone else, not even second, not even third, not even fourth, like fifth. No one else matters except your circle of friends and family. So as long as you're doing that, you know, you're good with your realm. But if you like, you know, if there's like some passerby that like needs your help, you're like, and if you help them out, like, that's none of your concern. That's none of your business. We're going to curse you because that's not who we are. We don't care. But if there's like a family obligation, like for instance, they have to host a gathering to make sure that their family remains in good standing, they would receive a blessing. And the way blessing and curses work is basically like a blessing means that if you're trying to do something using the skill that is bound to that realm, you'll do fine. Like you'll do great even. But if you are cursed, that means basically you're going to get the rug tugged onto you anytime you use it until you make up for what you did.
And what kinds of things have you seen adventures, sessions revolve around? What do players actually do during a session?
They usually talk to each other most of the time.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, they negotiate what they want to do, and they remind each other, like, oh, if you do that, we might get in trouble, or something like that. Or they dive super deep into whatever relationship they happen to be with the other players at the table.
So do you find as a GM that you don't have to do much, like in terms of inciting incidents or situational setup, that you can just kind of pull the string and let them go?
Well, once they're in the situation, yeah, but obviously you still need to make the goal obvious as to what they're supposed to do. Otherwise, they're just going to be putzing around. But once they know what they need to do, they're right on it.
I saw that you have this idea of the Restless Dead, which immediately I was like, oh, okay, we've got some undead to fight in here. But you make a particular point of it being a thing that's really interesting, but isn't a thing that you necessarily go to fight. So what's the Restless Dead about?
The Restless Dead is basically creatures or people that have passed away, but their spirits haven't moved on yet. So they're not necessarily angry, or it's not like, you know, The Ring or anything where they're just stuck there in a loop of murdering everybody that is in their vicinity. It's more like their loved one like passed and then never got to say goodbye, or they were sworn to protect this thing, and now that they've passed on, they still feel obligated to do so, or they're in denial, like, no, I'm not dead, I'm still at home partying with my friends, or they feel bad for an adventurer that, you know, is all alone, has no one to give them their final rites, and they're like, I have to stay alive just a little bit longer just to help them out, so at least someone can be there so they're not alone when they pass on.
Let me ask a couple of broader questions here, because I met you very briefly at Metatopia a number of years ago, and I've seen you talk about this on G+ a lot. I've also seen you talk about your experiences with D&D 5e and people stepping on your toes in various games there. I always love reading your stuff. I think you're one of my favorite people to follow on G+.
Aww.
But you've done Metatopia and Dreamation and some of these things a lot. So what advice would you give someone who is going to take their game to play test either at Metatopia or somewhere else? What has been the thing that you've had to learn in doing that?
I've learned to take feedback in stride, because the first time I went to Metatopia, I got like overwhelmed by all the feedback, and I like crashed and burned, and luckily there were friends to catch me, because I was like a blubbering mess. But it's just best, just take all the feedback, write it down, don't reflect on it too much, and then, after the playtest is over, thank them for their time, decompress a bit, and then go back and look at the feedback. Because if you try and take it all in at the time, you're not going to know what's good feedback. You're not going to want to know what's bad feedback. Everything is going to eventually just sound bad because they're saying words, so that must mean it's something bad. And another thing is that it's okay to be afraid. Like, I know whenever I play tested my game or let other people run it for me, that it felt like, having a kid on a tricycle and you're like behind it, like, Mommy, you can let go, it's okay. Like, no, I can't, because something might happen to you. It's okay to feel that way, but don't let it control you, because what you're making is probably wonderful, and there are going to be people that are going to feel the same way about it. So don't be afraid to let go of the tricycle. Your baby will be okay.
And you've also done a lot of them play testing and play of these new games at Metatopia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, from the player side, what for you has been the most successful playtest? As a player, what have good playtest GMs done that you dig, or how do they approach those? I'm asking you a big question. I'm sorry, I'm not going to hitting you with this stuff here. I asked this because when I went to Metatopia, that was one of I was completely unprepared for it, and I freaked out, and I went away from that shaking. So yeah, I'm asking this for advice.
Like, you're asking, like, as a player, what do you like?
Yeah. So when you played in good play tests, what did the person who was running it do that you felt like you came away validated, or you felt like it was handled well?
Well, I definitely like play tests where, even though obviously we're testing the rules, it still felt like we were playing a solid game. And I liked ones that didn't talk down to me. Because, I'm just there to help you out. If I don't understand a rule, I'm sorry. And I liked play tests where they got me excited to play. Like, they would start out with a more elaborate than a elevator pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, now I definitely want to play. I'm super stoked. The best way to get me excited to play your game is to tell me how character gen works. Because once character gen starts, I'm on it. I'm like, I'm ready to go. This is the best game ever. I'm so excited to play it. Because, like, I know I did a play test a couple of years back for Pillars of Fire by Cam Banks, and all we did was character gen. Like, oh, I want to play my character so bad. Oh, my
God. Yeah. So, when you went to start thinking about actually turning this into a full-fledged game, now having done some playtesting and stuff, what was the process you went through to kind of come to develop this, to do the refinement in the last couple of years?
Well, there was, like, the first Metatopia, and then I was like, okay, this game's done, so I'm just coming to Metatopia to fine-tune everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got my feedback. I'm like, okay, this obviously isn't done. So each Metatopia was basically being like, okay, now I'm done, but not actually being done. And it was slowly me chipping away the stuff that didn't need to be there and adding the stuff that did need to be there. But then there was a point where I took away too much and had to add more content back in. But I'm pretty happy with it now. Like, after the last Metatopia last year, I was pretty sure that I was as done as it was going to be. And I think it did exactly what I wanted it to.
That's awesome. I can't imagine coming away from a playtest and feeling satisfied at this point, so...
Codex Storm, the newest issue of the Gauntlets RPG zine, is now available in our Patreon feed. Codex Storm is all about fantasy. Here's what you'll find inside. To the Halls of the Stormlord, an epic adventure for macchiato monsters inspired by Norse myth. The Rubble of Kiraminar's Sanctum, a collection of elements for Dungeon World. The Subgothy of Storms, or Lightning in a Bottle, a journey scenario for 5e and other fantasy games. A Murder in Port Tam, which is a wild chase scenario for the Black Hack. Our newest miscellany, 3 dozen unnatural weather phenomena, 5 pieces of beautiful art, and a custom layout by Ollie Jeffrey. To get Codex Storm, just make a $4 or higher pledge to the Gauntlet Patreon in August. Thanks.
I'm going to ask you a really vague and general question here, and it's something that struck me at the Ennies this year. And so I was at Gen Con, and like at the Ennies, we didn't see a lot of women on stage, and we saw some more POC designers and stuff, but it's still a weird imbalance. A lot of white dudes like me, and even older. And what can people who have entrenched power or companies or things like that, what should they be doing to expand the base of designers and players and things like that, to include more women, to include more persons of color? I mean, how should they be using their power, do you think?
Oh, geez, that's a loaded question.
I know. I'm hitting you with this at the end here. You know, we've been trying on the Gauntlet to bring more people in, but I want to know what we can do better, or what are our obstacles right now for people. Things that me, as, you know, an almost 50-year-old white dude doesn't see. Because I have my wife to point out all the gender things that I've missed over the years, and I have missed so many dumb things when I've run, so.
Well, kind of taking from the question about, as a playtester, what you like, I know one thing that might help is, like, I know there are a lot of people in the community that are doing their best to be inclusive. Like, they're not all people. They're like, you know, gatekeepers, etc., etc. But I know when things go wrong, they tend to panic. So, like, sometimes you're in a play test, and the GM or the MC realizes that everything is not going as planned. So they start backtracking and explaining things and fixing things that are broke as they are playing it. And sometimes you need to stop, step back, and reflect on that later. But realizing you're at least trying to do your best now, because if you just fiddle with the fiddly things, it's not going to change anything. And I might be completely wrong here. I mean, I don't have all the answers, because I tend to hide from drama. But another thing is, like, I know I said this in an interview once, is that, you know, I feel like the community is a lot like a sandbox, and the sand should be for everybody. So if you treat it like that, I think that would make it feel more inclusive. But again, I could be wrong.
Do you feel like games are getting better at representation? I know there's been changes, but I mean, in terms of you coming in and looking as a woman, as a person of color, do you feel like those changes have been substantive?
Well, like, I know, for example, Pathfinder went through an update where instead of races, they're saying ancestry. I'm like, wow, that sounds really cool. I'm surprised no one thought of that sooner, but I didn't think of that. So of course, I'm not gonna blame them for that. But I'm like, oh, it's so genius, because it sounds so much more not offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are a lot of games that, like, you know, scream about how inclusive they are, and that's great too. Like, I just wish it wasn't so difficult, because I mean, I know that as a woman and a person of color that I should think about these things, but.
No, it's not your responsibility necessarily, I don't think. No, I just, you know, I've been in the gaming for a long time, and I'm just amazed at how shitty it has been in the past for people. And I hope that it's getting better. So
I've had this discussion before where it's like, you know, there are sometimes you're at a game and someone walks out uncomfortable. It's not necessarily even a play test. And, you know, there are people who are going to be a shield. There are people that are going to be a sword, and there are people that are going to be more like a support class. And I know a lot of times as a gamer, I'm like, I wish I could be the community person with a sword, but I'm not. I'm totally support class.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a way to be more inclusive is just to embrace what kind of community person you are. Because I'm constantly trying to be someone I'm not, and I feel like that is conflicting with me helping anyone. So there's going to be people there that are going to be the sword, and they're going to, you know, approach someone that is treating someone hostilely and stop it and shut that down. They're going to be the people that are shields and that deflect it. And there are people that the support class are like, hey, I noticed that you were upset during the game. What can I do to help you? And then there are people who've done that to me. Like, I've like totally shut down a game. So I've had someone approach me afterwards, because there are times where, I mean, of course, back in the day where it's like, I'm the only person who identifies as female. And a lot of times I'll be like, I didn't like what he said, but there wasn't any safety tools, and I don't want to make a big deal of it. So I'm not going to say anything, but I'm really mad. And if we create an environment where you don't have to feel that way, I'm just more of a fan of baby steps because I have no idea how to make the entire community more inclusive. I just know what the individual person can try and do so they can be happier and they can make other people happier.
That is a super sharp analogy there with the sword, shield, and support. That's really smart. I want to point to one last thing that I love about your game Prism, because I do love it. It's really cool, and I love the art. I love what you've done with it. Is where did you come up with the idea of doing the almanac at the back with the illustrations?
So I originally had the spells just be like, it was just text description. So basically what you see now, but in word form. But I thought it would be more fun since it's not like a spellcaster game where this spell does this and that's all it does. It's like, This is a spell that lets you manipulate plants. So the sky's the limit. So you need some boundaries. So I want to be like, it'd be really fun if we had an example of each kind of difficulty tier for each spell. So I collaborated with one of my friends that I thought would be really good at it, Maria Smith, who needs to be on social media more often, and you should hire her because her art's really good. Shout out. We sat together and listened to music and decided what instrument would pair, or what aptitude thing would pair best with an element. So we're like, oh, pole dancing and water, that'll be great. So we thought of a simple one, a typical one, a hard one, a tough one, and we did that for each element until and then we finalized the poses and what spells they were casting. But I just wanted to add as much art as possible because I love artwork in a game, and the more artwork the game has, the happier I am. So
yeah, no, I've never seen any game do that before, and it's really sharp, and I'm like, oh wow, that's like super obvious that people need to be doing that more. It's a really cool idea, and I hope we see other gamers and other designers take your lead, because I really love how evocative that is. So is there anything else you want to say about Prism that I haven't touched on during this?
Oh, well, I did want to slightly touch that during the tea party, there is a discussion about comfort levels with what content there's going to be in the game. Because while I do mention the X card, and the X card is a good tool, I'm a huge fan of verbal confirmation. Because you can say, oh, I'm totally in for this, I totally want this, and then you get into the game like, you know what, I'm not feeling this anymore, can we like totally back out, please? That'd be really great. But because a lot of the content I put in for safety were just from personal experiences where it's like you get knee deep into something and you're like, I don't know what to do, if I want to bail out or not, and I don't want to make anyone upset, but I wanted to make it clear that if this is no longer makes you feel happy or comfortable or safe, you can say, let's talk about something else.
Awesome. Well, listeners, that's our show. I want to thank you for checking this out. You can find all of our podcasts at gauntlet-rpg.com. This is also associated, of course, with the Gauntlet Hangouts, which is an online community of gaming. You can also find out about that at the gauntlet-rpg.com site. And we have a Patreon to back that up. We do a lot of online games each month, and we do the podcast. We also have a zine called Codex. Whitney, thanks once again for coming and talking with us about Prism.
Thank you for having me.